Hey guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It is 9 o'clock on a Thursday, which means it's time for a magic stuff. And today I'm going to be talking to you about possibly one of the most important subjects that you will need to master as a magician, which is performance nerves and anxiety. And this is a really important topic. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on it. It's a question that's come up on the channel an awful lot. People want to know how to deal with nerves, how to deal with performance anxiety. And this is just an important topic. I've actually gone and made notes. You can always tell when I'm taking things very, very seriously. I take notes. And it is important because I think every magician has been there when they first start getting into magic. And it kind of works like this. You first start getting into magic, you maybe buy a magic set, or you buy a few tricks, or you buy a book, and you kind of get hooked and you start learning more magic and more magic. Very quickly you immerse yourself in this wonderful subject of magic and you're learning everything that you can, and you're normally just performing in your bedroom, or you're trying it out on a wife or a mom or a dad or somebody like that. And then it gets to that point where you have to actually perform to somebody. And that's when you start feeling nervous. And you can be somebody who's never been nervous, never felt nerves at all, never felt any sort of anxiety at all. And then it kind of washes over you. And it's kind of like your hands start shaking, like really start shaking. I've actually made some notes here on stuff that can happen. And I want to know, anybody here, if you felt any of these, let me know in the comments down below. Whether you're new to magic and this is something that you're trying to get past now, or whether it's something that you experienced when you first started magic and you've been doing it for 20 years. And if you have been doing it for 20 or 30 years, do you still feel nervous now? Because I do from time to time, I'll be honest with you, I do. Racing pulse. Rapid breathing, you start feeling your pulse, you can feel your heart beating, and you start breathing faster and faster. And whenever you're getting to a point where you know you have to perform, your mouth starts feeling dry, your throat starts feeling a bit tight. The worst one for magicians, the absolute worst one, your hands start trembling. You might have practiced a sleight or a move 1,000,000 times. You've watched that DVD, you've watched that download, you've practiced that sequence of moves. You can do it inside out, back to front, upside down and back again. And yet you're now about to do this move and your hands start shaking. And it can happen to anybody. One of my favorite coin magicians is Jeff Latter. And on the first New York Coin Magic Symposium, which was all about coins across, he performs a routine which I've actually done on a Magic Live, which is a 3-coin routine where the 3 coins appear, they jump from one place to another, and then they disappear. And he's performing it in front of a whole bunch of magicians, and his hands are shaking, something rotten. And he does the moves really well, but you can see his hands physically shaking. He actually turns around to the audience at one point and says, "Is it me, or is there an earthquake going on in here?" It can happen to anybody. This isn't just exclusive to people who are new into magic. This is something that can happen to anybody. The other symptoms that I've got written down here: sweaty hands, which are terrible if you're doing coin magic especially, and you're trying to palm a coin and that coin's just unable to stick in your palm because your hands are so sweaty. It's terrible if you're doing close-up magic and you feel, if you get nervous and you start sweating, it doesn't look good. That if you're covered in sweat and you're walking up to people, it's terrible. And then the worst one for me, feeling sick. You physically start feeling sick, even the thought of performing. If any of this stuff you can relate to, then please, first of all, don't worry, because you are not alone. This has happened to almost every magician that I know. And what I'm going to try and do in this video is I'm going to give you a few practical tips that you can use to reduce nerves and to eliminate that anxiety, so that you can go out there and you can do an amazing job and you can perform, whether it's to family or friends, or whether it's just in a social situation, or even if it's somebody who's wanting to go and start being a professional magician. Whatever it is, I'm going to try and help you here on this video, and I'm going to try and give you some tips and tricks that'll help you become less nervous and less anxious when you think about performing. Okay, so I've got 13 tips altogether, but before I give you these 13 tips, let me tell you a little bit of a story, because, you'll get nervous, you'll feel nerves and anxiety throughout your career at different points. On a recent Q&A a few weeks ago, I told everyone I still get nervous now. I still get nervous now. The first time I did a Zoom show and I did a corporate show, I got nervous. A few years ago, I was asked to host an event and be the actual host of a big awards dinner. I'd never done that before. That was out my comfort zone. I got nervous. I remember the first time I do a lot of motivational speaking, and I remember going to being invited to speak at the business show in London at the Excel, which is a big deal. It's a big deal. And I went on after one of the dragons from Dragon's Den, right? And all of the speakers they had on that day was like a who's who of business experts in the UK. And then I went on at the end of the day to close the whole thing. I looked out at stage one. I was on the main stage in front of maybe about 500 or 600 people. And they were all looking at it like, who's Craig Petty? And I was so nervous walking out, like, people don't know who I am. How have I got how are they going to listen to me giving business advice? They've never even heard of me. I'm just following a dragon from Dragon's Den. What the hell? I felt nervous in that situation. I'll be honest, I don't feel nervous now when I do close-up magic. There's no situation in close-up magic now where I get nervous. I don't get nervous doing a family show. I don't get nervous doing a kids show. I still get nervous from time to time going on stage if it's outside my comfort zone. One of the last gigs I did in February before lockdown was a big illusion show for a couple of thousand people. Man, I felt so nervous. I was in the wings. I was opening the whole thing. And anybody will tell you this. If you start performing on stage, right, and I was doing an illusion show, if you start performing on stage, it's always more nerve-wracking if you're going on stage cold. And what I mean by that is if you've done close-up magic or something beforehand and they've seen you, then you've kind of built a connection up with that audience. When you walk on stage, you're not walking on cold. That's not a horrible situation to go into. But when you're at a conference and they've been sitting there all day getting death by PowerPoints and there's 2,500 people in the room and then you walk out on stage and they don't know who you are and you're there and it's like, oh, whoa. It's a very nerve-wracking experience. You have to get those people on side at the very, very beginning. And I'll tell you, I always wanted to be a stage magician. It took me a long time to get into stage magic. I always wanted to be a stage magician. And I'll tell you a little story very, very quickly. I'll tell you a little bit of story about when I got a chance to do my first stage gig. And up until this point, I was just doing close-up, I was doing kids shows, stuff like that. And I kind of thought about what I'd do in a stage show. And then I have no idea how it happened, but I had a phone call. And the phone call was from a guy that ran a comedy club. And he said, hey, would you like to be the headlining act at this comedy club? And I was like, man, yes, of course I would. That would be amazing. I would love to be the headlining act at this comedy club. So I said yes. And he said, great, it's in a week's time. I was like, cool, I'll be there. Now, I had a week to put this act together, and I'll be honest with you, life got in the way, and it was probably about a day or two beforehand I actually put the act together. And I was working at the time with another guy called Russell, who was my business partner back then. And we put this kind of act together, and, we did Bill in Lemon and stuff. There was nothing groundbreaking. And the problem was I wasn't really funny. I wasn't a comedy magician. I did magic, and I was appearing at a comedy club as a headlining act. I have still, to this day, have no idea how they found me. Anyway, I went there and I knew I was closing the first half. So there were like 5 or 6 acts on before me. And I was watching these acts and they were hilarious. Like, they were so funny. And I remember looking at Russell, my partner back then, and I was like, oh, this is not good. We're going to die in our arse. And I went on stage with Russell and we did die in our arse, absolutely died on our arse. I've told this story a few months ago on the channel, but I'll tell it you again. The finale of the show was, because we were headlining the first half and the second half. And the finale of the first half was to do a lottery prediction thing that we put together. So the whole idea of this lottery prediction, right, was that they would write down on a pad 6 different numbers, and then I would have a bag with different balls in it, lottery balls, and somebody else would pull out 6 balls and they would match. And I thought, well, that's a good trick. And it was a nice method. I mean, it wasn't funny at all, and we hadn't scripted it to be funny. It was a comedy club, and looking back, it was a stupid idea. But the method was kind of clever, because what we had is we had a remote vision board. So we had a clipboard where he could write the numbers. Russell was backstage, and he had all of these balls with numbers just sitting in a tray so you could see them all, and it had a flat change bag. And the idea was he would be backstage, he would look at the numbers that were being written down, he'd drop the balls into the bag, and then bring the bag out, and they'd be set in a flat change bag to be able to pull them out. Job done. Okay. So I had him write these numbers down. I made a big deal. Now take the piece of paper, fold it up. Very good. Hold it in your hand. Don't let me see it. Really built it up. And I was like, Russell, can you bring out the balls? And he was like, no. You heard a thing come back from the wings. No. I'm like, no? Now think about it from my point of view, right? How is this a no? Why is this a no? I knew that he had the ball. He was sitting there right in front of them. I'd set them up. I said, no. Where are they? He's like, no. I said, why not? I need the balls. He said, I can't find them. I'm like, where are they? He's like, I don't know. And we're having this conversation. The audience just haven't got a clue what's going on. It's terrible. It's already dreadful before I started this trick, right? So I look over at the wings and he's kind of doing this. And I kind of realized that the pad hadn't worked. So he didn't have the numbers. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I have very limited stage experience. And I knew I had to say something to kill time. And I remember saying, have you checked the car? He just shouted back going, I don't think that's going to help, to be honest. And so I kind of realized I needed to get this guy to write the numbers down again and hope that it would work. So I took the piece of paper off him and I said, now you wrote these numbers on this piece of paper. No one has seen them. And as I said that, I flicked the piece of paper and I go, oh, I've seen the numbers. We're going to have to write them down again. And it just got a groan from the audience. I honestly shudder thinking back to this. So he wrote the numbers down again. I heard Russell at the wings go, yes, because I knew it worked. So I said, bring the balls out, and I got somebody else to draw the balls, and they matched. The trouble is, this guy got bored at this point, and so he wrote down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's so anticlimactic bringing the balls out. I knew it was bad, right? Because the guy who had planned the whole thing, I was meant to be headlining the second half. He said, yeah, instead of headlining the second half, could you maybe just do 5 minutes, please? At the beginning of the second half. It was truly abysmal. It was truly abysmal. And the reason I'm telling you this story, right? The reason I'm telling you this story is because it very easily could have got to the point where I quit at that point, because I've never felt so bad. I'll tell you one other thing, actually. The headliner at the end of the second half, right, was this guy. I'll never forget his name, DJ K Weezy, right? And his thing was he took suggestions from the audience and he made raps up on the spot about what the audience was saying. I had to sit there because we couldn't leave until the whole event had finished. So I had to sit there listening from the wings as he spent about 15 minutes rapping about how shit I was. I mean, honestly, I really wish that the ground could have opened up and swallowed me whole. I have never felt so bad in my life. Really, honestly, it was terrible. And I did come close to quitting. I'll be honest, I came close to quitting and saying, look, this stage thing isn't for me. I'm just going to be a close-up magician. You know, I don't need to work on stage. Fast forward several years, you know, I've performed on stage all over the world. I'm telling you this not to brag, but to tell you that it doesn't matter how bad things get, because one of the problems with being nervous, right, and having nerves and having anxiety is having a bad experience, you know, dying on stage. And it's how you deal with it, right? It's how you deal with it, because there's 3 ways you can deal with dying on stage. The first way is you just forget about it. You just forget about it. I'm going to put it out of my mind, which I see a lot of people doing. You know, they're dying on stage, they're dying their arse, and they just forget about it. They put it out of their mind. All right, that didn't happen. The second way is to blame the audience, right? Which is what I used to do. Well, that wasn't my fault. That was the audience's fault, because the audience were terrible, not me. And then the third way of dealing with it is, so you can blame the audience, you can forget about it, or you can just let it consume you and ultimately control your own destiny. You know, it causes you to quit ever trying to do that thing that you were going to do. As I've said, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't quit. The other 2 ways of dealing with it, you never want to... Oh, there is a 4th way. And the 4th way, which is the way that I suggest you do, is to actually learn from the experience, right? You don't want to just forget about it, but you also don't want to blame the audience, because I used to do that. I used to come home to Sarah, my wife, and I used to say, terrible gig, terrible audience, terrible gig, terrible audience, especially when I got into holiday parks. And I did holiday parks, because the first few holiday parks I did, I died, man. And I used to ring Sarah up and say, well, then, you know, another terrible audience. And she turned around to me. She said, it's not the audience, it's you. And that's the first piece of advice I can give you. You have to understand that whatever you want to do in magic, whether you want to be a kids entertainer, whether you want to be a close-up magician, but especially if you want to be a stage magician or an illusionist, you are going to die on your ass more than once. It's going to happen. The way that you learn from this is to learn from it. Analyze what's happened. try and work out why you died on your ass and fix it for the next time. It's not a problem failing as long as you fail forward. As long as you realize that you have to learn from every single time that you've made a mistake. Because if you don't and you blame the audience, well then ultimately you're not learning anything. And here's the thing, whenever you point the finger at somebody else, there's three fingers pointing back at you. And you have to be the sort of person that goes, okay, that was my fault. Everything in your act is your fault. If you did a great job, if you went out, if you smashed it, well done, good for you, good job. My hat's off to you. You're awesome. However, if you've screwed up and you've died on your ass, that's your fault as well. And only you can fix it. So before I even give you these 13 tips that I've got for you, the first thing I want you to understand, and I learned this the hard way, is you have to die on your ass. And if you can't handle the thought of dying on your ass, then maybe take up flower arranging or something where there's less anxiety and less stress. But if you want to be the sort of person that goes out and performs in front of people, whether it be close up or on stage or whatever, you have to accept that at some point you're going to die on your ass. And the only way that you're going to be able to get better is by looking at the situation and improving every single time. Work out what went wrong and work out how you can fix it so the next time you don't make that same mistake. So I wanted to share that story with you because, it's important. But now I'm going to give you 13 tips, 13 really practical tips that I use every day. Right now, I still use them. 25 years later in my career, I still use them. 13 tips that you can use to help you reduce anxiety, reduce stress, and more importantly, be able to present better to an audience and ultimately get better reactions. So the first tip I'm going to give you is be prepared. Be prepared for every single situation, but more importantly, be prepared for the specific gig that you're going to. The worst thing in the world is going to a gig and not knowing what you're walking out on stage to. You don't know what the audience is going to be. You don't know how many people are going to be in the audience. You don't know how big the stage is. You don't know how it's laid out. You don't know what the sound system's going to be like. You don't know if there is a sound system. You don't know if you need to provide your own sound system. You don't know anything. You don't know if there's other acts on that night. You don't know how much they've been drinking up until the point that you're meant to go on stage. All of this stuff is really important. There's no point preparing a really edgy show with smash and stab and those sort of routines if it's a family audience and there's kids in the audience. There's no point doing really difficult, complicated mentalism if people have been drinking all day and they're pissed out their head. You need to make sure that you are prepared for the situation that you go into. And it's very important when you take your own bookings, but it's even more important when you work through an agent, because agents don't understand. A lot of agents work with musicians and music acts. They don't work with magicians and special acts. So a lot of the time, if you take a booking through an agent, they'll literally just give you a thing and they'll just say, here you go, it's this venue, it's this time, knock yourself out. You need more than that. You need to go to the agent and say, well, look, can you provide me with more information? I need to know this, 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 and this. And if you haven't got this information, have you got a contact that I can call so I can get this information? But it's very, very important that you ask those questions. You should know exactly what the audience is and exactly what the stage setup is so that when you get there, you don't have unforeseen circumstances or unforeseen situations. There's nothing worse. I remember once turning up to do a full illusion act in someone's living room. That was my fault, and I never made that mistake again. Okay, I came with all these big boxes, and it's like a terraced house. Well, that ain't going to work. That's not going to work. So be prepared. Know the type of audience that you're going in for, and know everything about that gig. Number 2, practice, practice, practice. The more you practice something, the better you will get at it. It baffles the mind that so many magicians don't practice. And I'm not just talking about practicing your double lift until you're blue in the face. I'm talking about practicing everything to do with the environment that you're performing in. So if you are hired as a walk-around close-up magician, ultimately your job is to connect groups of people together. You are trying to raise the atmosphere and get everyone more excited. Understand that when you're booked as a close-up magician at a walk-around gig, it's not about you. It's about the event as a whole, right? And what you're trying to add value to that event. So you need to be really good at connecting people. And the way to get really good at connecting people is to make sure that you are very much a people person. You need to be able to walk up to a group of people and within 5 seconds, get them wanting to speak to you, get them to want to listen to you. And it's a very difficult skill. And it's a skill that a lot of close-up magicians don't even think about. They practice their double lift, they practice their age change, they practice their Elmsley count, and they go, right, okay, I've got these tricks down. And then they go to a gig and it's like, hi, I'm the magician. Want to see a trick? Well, no, we don't. Piss off. Because you need to be in a situation where you walk over and immediately you're the guy they want to listen to. Hey, how you doing, guys? You having a good evening? Wonderful. My name's Craig. I'm the magician. I'm not as dodgy as I look, honestly. I've been hired to come over here this evening and just show you guys a couple of tricks. You, sir, you look very excited about this. Do me a favor. Can you hold this for me? You can? Fantastic. And you're in. Boom. You need to learn how to get people on your side within seconds. You need to read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People. You need to think about your presentations when you're a close-up magician for every environment. How are you going to present this trick? Walk around. How are you going to present this trick? Tables. How are you going to present this trick when it's a big table and people can't hear you and the lighting is low and the DJ is on? How are you going to present that trick then? What are you going to do? What are you going to say? What trick selections are you going to use? You don't want to be hiding in the corner of the room, scared to go over to the table because it's not the right environment for you. All of this stuff you need to think through. But also, if you're performing on stage, you need to think of this stuff as well. You know, you need to think about, it's not just, I'm going to do this trick, this trick, this trick, then I'm going to go into this trick, then do this trick, finish off with this trick, and then do an encore with this trick. Perfect. You need to do full dress rehearsals. The mistake I see a lot of stage magicians making is they haven't done a dress rehearsal. So you can see that they haven't thought through where every prop is. And it just looks clumsy and it looks uneloquent. You need to make sure that you know where everything is seamlessly. You know, I've seen people in the past and they're like, oh, I need this. Where is it? Oh, I don't know. Has anybody got this I can borrow because I don't know where it is? And it just looks amateur hour. And it's the sort of thing that takes magic, which should be considered an art form, and drops it down in the gutter because people just think that we're taking the piss. You need to make sure that you practice everything. So when you walk on stage, you are used to that environment. You know where everything is because you've practiced this 100 times. Practice, practice, practice. Because when you've practiced it so much that you know it inside out and back to front, then you'll feel a lot more confident. You'll feel less nervous because you've been through this. But if you've just wrote down a list of tricks that you want to do on stage and you've not practiced it, and you just walk out on stage for the first time, you're going to be nervous. It's as simple as that. So you need to make sure that you practice, practice, practice. Number 3, don't drink, limit caffeine and sugar intake on the day of the performance. Don't have lots and lots of coffee. If you are a coffee drinker or you're a sort of guy that drinks a lot of soda, a lot of sugary drinks, cool, brilliant stuff, but try to limit that on the day of the performance because you don't want to be so ridiculously highly strung. You want to keep that caffeine intake low, and that's really, really important. And also, you know, and there's two schools of thoughts about alcohol and whether you should drink just before you go on stage or whether you should drink just before you do a close-up job. You know, different people handle alcohol in different ways. As a general rule, I'd say no, it's probably not a good idea because it will dull your senses, especially if you have 3 or 4 pints, right? It will dull your senses. So unless, you know what, I'd even say no. Don't drink alcohol before you do a gig. And especially not if you're a close-up magician. Or at least if you do, take some fucking breath mints first. Because the amount of times I've seen a close-up magician and they've had a pint at the bar and then they've gone out and performed to people and they stink of booze. Don't do that, okay? It's as simple as that. You want to make sure that you're limiting stuff that's going to dull your senses. You need to have heightened senses when you walk out on stage. Number 4, do not eat just before you go on stage. I cannot stress this strongly enough. I made the mistake a few times when I first started doing stage work that I would literally be backstage eating and they'd be like, oh, you're on in 2 minutes. And when you walk out on stage after a meal, you feel bloated, you feel heavy, and that shouldn't be the case. You should be energetic, you should be charismatic, you should light up that room. You should be walking out on that stage and people can see straight away the second you walk out that you are the man or the woman. Right? And the way to do that is to make sure that you don't feel bloated. You know, who's been there? You know, let's talk about Christmas, right? Christmas Day, you have that massive meal, right? And then you can't You can't move for the rest of the evening. You're just sitting in that chair unable to move because you've ate so much, right? It's really important that you just don't eat just before you go on stage. Number 5, on the flip side of number 4, which was don't eat before you go on stage, number 5 is do make sure you eat on the day of the performance. I've seen some people that go, I always feel sick when I have to perform, especially at a big gig, so I don't eat. If you don't eat, it's not going to be good. That's energy. Just make sure you eat, but eat the right type of food. Don't have a McDonald's before you get to the gig. Make sure that you eat something healthy. Eat the right type of food, but eat. Very important that you eat before you go on stage. Don't try and go, well, I feel sick, so I'm not going to eat. You have to eat. Very important. Okay, so number 6, and this one is very important. Focus not on your fear, but what you enjoy about performing. Okay, it's like Yoda says, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering, right? You don't want to focus on your fear. You don't want to focus on fear. You want to focus on what you enjoy about performing. What is it that you enjoy about performing? Is it that you like the idea of standing in front of people and having them cheer and clap you? Is it that you've got an ego and you want to be the center of attention? What is it? What is it that you enjoy about performing? And then try to make sure that you think about that thing and that thing only. Go back and watch Mark Oberon's interview on Talk Magic. It was episode 2. Go back and watch it. He actually talks about visualize the audience laughing and cheering. So when you go on stage or you're sitting in the wings about ready to go on stage, visualize that audience having a great time. Visualize them giving you a standing ovation. Actually imagine what it's going to be like in your head. And then go out. And it sounds ridiculous having that notion of visualizing this, but it is really important. If you visualize something like that, if you kind of think, right, okay, this is what I want it to look like, it's going to be so much better. You want to make sure that you focus on things that make you feel happy. Focus on things going well, not on things going badly. Okay, so number 7 is be positive. Don't be negative. That's so important. You've got to be positive. You have to be positive, okay? And I see a lot of people, they look at things negatively. And if you look at things negatively, it's going to end up badly. I'll give you an example, because everyone knows I like marketing and I like sales. That's my other passion. That's what my background's in. And I used to train salespeople back in the day, many, many years ago. I used to train salespeople. And one of the things I always used to say to salespeople is you have to have the right attitude when you're selling to people, whether it's door-to-door sales or it's phone sales, telesales. You have to have the right attitude. If you come in with a stinking attitude and you kind of go, I'm not feeling it today. I don't think anybody's going to buy anything off me. I think everyone's going to say no. Really can't feel it today. I can't be bothered. Well, guess what? You're not going to sell anything. If you come in and you're like, right, okay, this is the day I'm going to smash it. I'm going to get 10 sales. I'm going to get 20 sales. I'm going to get 30 sales. That's when salespeople typically have their best day. And the reason is, very, very simply, people buy your enthusiasm and your excitement. So if you're excited and enthusiastic about stuff, people will catch up on that and they'll buy into it. So I always used to say to salespeople when I was training them, be enthusiastic, be positive, don't be negative. Take that negativity and put a pin in it. If there's something happening in your life that's really upsetting, whether it be somebody's ill or there's been a family situation or something, whatever, you need to put a pin in that. You need to get rid of that and put it out the way. You just need to focus on the positive. Well, it's exactly the same when you walk on stage. I'll tell you a story right now. I remember when we won many years ago, I won this thing called Brit Idol. In 2012, I won this thing called Brit Idol with my illusion act, right? And it was a big deal, and we were in the final, and we won the whole thing. But here's the story. On the way to set up for Brit Idol, it was in a theatre in Birmingham. And on the way over to the theatre in the morning at about 10 o'clock, I had a phone call from a paramedic, and I was like, "Hi, can I help you?" And the guy was on the phone saying, "Hi, is this Craig Petty?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." He's like, "Hi, just so you know, I'm here with your father. He's passed away." I felt terrible. Me and my dad were so close. I wasn't necessarily that close with my mom, but me and my dad were ridiculously close. And I felt that phone call. It took literally the wind out my sails. I felt sick. I felt terrible. And I said to the rest of the Illusion Act, I said to Russell and Anna and Tiffany, I said, just go, set up. I need to go and deal with this. It's not until the evening. I'll let you know what's happening, but just go. I went back home to my mum and dad's house. The paramedics were there. My mum was in pieces. She was upstairs. She passed out. It was not a nice situation, and I had to spend the day dealing with this. I then went and I then went back to meet them in the evening after I'd done everything that I could do, and I entered Brit Idol, and we won. We won Brit Idol, and the reason we won is because I literally took that horrible, traumatic experience that I'd had just a few hours before, and I put a pin in it. I put it out the way, I took it out of my mind, and I went out and I did the best job that I possibly could. And that's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. You have to be positive. If there's something happening in your life that's quite a negative experience, or something that's really overwhelming you and making you think about it all the time, you need to push it to one side. It's as simple as that. You need to think positively, else you can't go on stage, else you will die in your ass, else you will be nervous, you will feel anxiety. You have to be able to think positive, not negative. Okay, so number 8, and this is kind of tied into the negativity thing, but I want to elaborate on this. On number 8, it's avoid self-doubt. The biggest reason that people feel nervous and they feel anxious when they go on stage is because they doubt their own ability. And, you know, some people call this imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people get, a lot of performers get, a lot of magicians get, a lot of business people get this as well. And the whole idea of imposter syndrome is that you feel like an imposter, that you aren't good enough. It's kind of like, why would this audience want to get into what I'm doing? They don't know who I am. What have I done to deserve being here? And I used to get it a lot when I started lecturing many years ago, when I first released my first set of products, and I was going out and lecturing to people. I used to go around magic societies and lecture to them, right? And I would work myself up something rotten just before a lecture. I'd be like, you know, what have I got to teach these people? You know, there's going to be people in this audience, in this magic club, that are going to be performing. They're going to have been performing like many years before I was even born. What right do I have to stand in front of everyone and show them what I do? And it was heightened at the Magic Circle. I lectured at the Magic Circle. I went out and I did a lecture at the Magic Circle. And man, that was nerve-wracking. I remember walking out on stage and a room full of people, and it was the who's who in magic. I mean, the who's who. Sitting down in the audience watching me, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so nervous. Well, what happened at the end of doing that lecture at the Magic Circle is they asked me to join. They said, you don't need to do an audition. That lecture was the audition. And by the way, we're going to put you straight in at AIMC. So I bypassed the normal membership and I went straight up to the next level on the back of my lecture. So I felt like I had nothing to teach these people, but it looks like they felt exactly the opposite. And that's the problem with imposter syndrome. It's self-doubt. It's doubting yourself. And you have to avoid that at all costs. You have to just turn around to yourself, look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you're awesome. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's so important to instill that self-belief in your mind. It really is. Okay, so number 9 is goals. It's really important to have a goal. And I'm not talking about a long-term goal. I want to be a Las Vegas headliner in 10 years. I'm talking about short-term goals. Have a goal for the for the gig that you're doing. How do you want this goal to go? How do you want this show to go? Do you want it to go well? Do you want it to go okay? Do you want to smash it? And here's my advice, yeah? You want to have a goal and you want to set that goal as high as possible. I've met people and they've said, yeah, I've got a gig next week. You know, I'm going to get through it. It's going to be okay. I'm going to get through it. And their goal was just to survive it, right? Well, here's the problem. Let me use an analogy. Let's say you're on a garden roof. You're on your garage roof in your garden, in your backyard. You've got a garage roof and you're standing on your garage roof. And there's a tree in your backyard, right? And what you want to do is you want to jump from the roof and you want to grab hold of that tree. And there's 2 branches on that tree. There's an upper branch and there's a lower branch. If you jump and grab hold of that bottom branch, and you aim for the bottom branch, and if you jump and you aim for that bottom branch, well, there's a good chance you'll get it and you'll grab it. But if you don't get it, there's nothing else to grab hold of. You're going to fall on your ass. If, however, you aim for the top branch and you put all your effort into aiming for that top branch and you push towards that top branch, you might reach it, you might not. But even if you don't, you're going to get a lot higher than you would have done if you've aimed for the lower branch and you've still got that lower branch to grab hold of. And the point I'm trying to make here is set your goals as high as possible. My goal every time I do a show is to go out there and absolutely smash it and get a standing ovation. Do I manage that every single time? No. But a lot of the time I will have done a lot better than if I just went there hoping to survive. And I know there's going to be people sitting here watching this going, have a goal for every single gig? That's a stupid idea. Well, okay, great. Don't do it. This is what works for me. And I still do this now. Do I still do it in close-up? Probably not. Probably not, because close-up for me now, I've been doing it so long, it's like a walk in the park. I can literally just walk in and not think about it, and I know I'm going to be fine. But when I'm still performing on stage, even after 10, 15 years, however long I've been doing it, I still have a goal every single time I go on that stage. Okay, so point number 10 is practice controlled breathing. Learn to relax, okay? I know it sounds ridiculous, but if you are feeling nervous, you're feeling anxious, if you're sitting backstage, just breathing like this, in through the nose and out through the mouth, it has the world of difference. It really does. You need to learn to relax, relax, relax. I've got a friend called Crosley calls himself the mindset technician. And he turns around and he says, he preaches about relaxing and taking things easy and learning how to not be nervous and not be anxious. And one thing he says is look at every situation. Is there, if you've got a problem that you have to deal with or a situation that's causing you stress and you have to deal with it, look at that situation and say to yourself, have you done everything that you can do? And then he says, well, if you have, ask yourself another question. Is there anything else you can do? And if the answer to that is no, don't stress about it because there's nothing you can do. So when you go to a gig and you're feeling anxious, look out of it. Is there anything that I can do? No. Have I done everything I can do? Yes. Then don't stress about it. Just learn to relax and take some deep breaths before you go on stage. It'll really help. It'll really help reduce those nerves and that sharp breathing. That's a big tip right there. Learn to relax. Look at the situation. Ask yourself if you've done everything. If there's anything else you can do, do it. But if there's not, relax and take some nice long breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Mouth? What's a mouth? Mouth. Okay, so point number 11 is when you come out on stage, connect with your audience. Have eye contact. Walk out on stage and act like you own the place immediately. Walk on stage. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How you all doing? My name's Craig. I'm going to be your magician here this evening. How's it all going? You okay? And look at the audience. I mean, obviously, you're going to perform in some venues where you can't even see the audience and it's just black, and that's cool. But what you want to do is, as much as possible, you want to connect with the audience. You want to come out there and own that audience from the very beginning. If you come out and you show fear, it's going to be very hard to get them on stage. If you come out and it's like, Hi, I'm Craig. I'm your magician. How you doing? And I remember one of the first stage gigs I did was on a Boxing Day. And I remember getting booked to do a cabaret show at a working men's club in a Boxing Day. And I walked out on stage and I was really nervous. And you know what? The show actually went well, but it kind of went better. The first 10 minutes were terrible. And then I got them on side with a particular routine and I kind of kept them. And the guy at the end, he came over and he said, look, I'm going to be honest with you, mate. When you first walked on stage, I thought you were going to be terrible, but you pulled it off. Thank you very much. And that's the thing. It's really important that you walk out on stage and you own that stage right from the very first second. You walk out on stage. That is your stage. You are hired to be there because you are the best at what you do. And even if you don't believe it, you have to believe in yourself. Number 12, very, very important one here. Understand that nerves and feeling anxious is a good thing. And I've talked about this on the channel before, but as we're talking about this whole subject now, let me reiterate. Nerves are good because it tells you that you care. If you weren't nervous, if you didn't care about a situation, if you genuinely didn't care how that gig went or how your performance went, and you just didn't care at all, then you wouldn't be nervous. You're only nervous because you care about something. You care that the gig goes well. You care that you do well. You care that you don't mess up. Whatever it may be, you care. You have an invested interest in your performance. And that's a good thing. That means that you care. And somebody who cares, that's great. That's the right type of person that's going out there and performing. So understand that nerves are good. You just need to make sure that you manage them effectively. You need to understand that when these nerves happen, you know how to deal with them, right? That's very, very important. But understand that nerves, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And then the final thing is, if you look good, you're going to feel good. It seems like a silly thing, but you make sure that you look the best that you can when you walk on stage, whatever that may be. To Piff the Magic Dragon, to John Vanderput, looking good on stage is dressing in a green dragon suit. And that's absolutely fine. That works for him. Look, how are you going to feel your best when you walk out on stage? Seriously think about your performing attire. What do you perform? I keep things very basic. I've gone through lots of different versions through the years, but these days I just wear a black t-shirt, I wear black jeans, smart black jeans, black t-shirt, and a black sort of jacket, sort of suit jacket type thing. And that's fine. I walk out on stage, I feel good. Black tends to suit me, so that's fine. I'm not going to say I look good, but I feel like I look good, and therefore I'm going to feel good. It's really important to think about what it is that you wear when you go out and you perform. Okay, it's very, very important, because psychologically, if you feel that you don't look great, then that's just going to make you even more anxious and really even more nervous. So make sure that you look good, and that'll help you feel good. So there you go. That is everything that I can suggest with regards to nerves and feeling anxious. Look, I'm going to round this whole thing up by telling you one more thing, which is, I promise you that there are going to be people watching this video right now that are excited about becoming professional magicians, or excited about going out and performing, and in 10 years' time, they won't be doing magic anymore. They won't have even picked up a magic prop or a pack of cards for 5 or 6 years. They will have got into magic, they'll have got super excited about it, they can't get over their nerves, they can't get over their anxiousness, and they've decided to just let magic go. And in 10 years' time, somebody will say to them, hey, pack of cards here, didn't you used to do magic? Oh, yeah, I haven't done that for years, I can't remember how to do it. I guarantee you, and I know there's people watching this that are going to go, well, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. But I know at least half of the people watching this video, in 10 years' time, you ain't going to be in magic. You're just not, because you couldn't get over the nerves and the anxiousness, or whatever it may be. You're going to have dropped out of magic, no matter how passionate about it you feel right now. So I've seen it happen over and over again. But then there's going to be other people that are on this call. I'm feeling like I'm doing a Zoom show here. There's going to be other people that are watching this video, and those people are going to be megastars. They're going to be headlining Vegas. They're going to be the new Jay Sankey. They're going to be creating magic. They're going to be magic famous. They're going to be performing all over the world. I know that there's going to be people that are watching this that have just started in magic that are going to be super famous and successful. The question is, who do you want to be? Do you want to be, and I'm not saying it's bad to drop out of magic. I'm sure the person that in 10 years' time that hasn't done magic in a while, I'm sure that they're happy with their life. But where do you want to be right now? Do you want to be the guy that kind of dropped out, didn't bother with it? Or do you want to be the guy that's super, super successful and famous doing what they do? And really, it's down to you. If you want to be a magician, even if it's as an amateur or a hobbyist or a semi-professional or professional, whatever level you want to do, if you want to do this, then you have to go out and want it. You have to go out and get it. You got to grab it by the balls and grab it over to you. You really do. What you can't do is go through the motions. You have to learn everything. You have to go out and you have to push comfort zones. And I think that's the key thing. You have to go out there and push past barriers, push comfort zones. Put yourself into situations where you feel uncomfortable. Smash it and then find another situation and put yourself into that situation, and keep doing it and doing it and doing it until you are at the top of your game. It's as simple as that. Now I'm throwing this whole thing over to you. Anyone else with advice, please put it down in the comments below, because I'm sure people would love to read it. I'm sure there's people that have got some advice and ideas that I haven't got. I'd love to hear them. And guys, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave me a comment. All that stuff really helps, and it'd be really good if you could do that for me. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to be back again tomorrow. My name is Craig from Magic TV.